They insulted the little black girl in a luxury store until her millionaire shut them down. It was a bright Saturday morning on Rodeo Drive, the kind of day where the sun turned luxury cars into mirrors and the air smelled faintly of designer perfume. 12-year-old Elena Carter pressed her face against the window of an elegant boutique, her reflection shimmering beside a row of glittering gowns. Her eyes widened with awe. This was it, the store she'd been dreaming about for weeks. Elena wasn't just any 12-year-old. She was a scholarship student, known across her school for her kindness, her grades, and the quiet strength that made teachers adore her. Graduation was just a week away, and she wanted one thing: a dress that would make her grandmother proud. Not expensive, not extravagant, just special. Beside her stood Martha Carter, her grandmother, a 67-year-old woman whose grace could silence any room. She carried herself with quiet dignity, her posture straight despite years of hard work and sacrifice. Martha had raised her daughter and granddaughter on principles stronger than money: respect, education, and faith in one's worth, even when the world tried to deny it. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share a word of love in the comments. That morning, the two walked hand in hand down Rodeo Drive, surrounded by the hum of expensive engines and the clinking of high heels on pavement. They didn't belong to this world of excess, but they didn't need to. Martha believed kindness could open more doors than any wallet ever could. Inside the boutique, the atmosphere shifted. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting off marble floors polished to perfection. Each rack was lined with dresses worth more than some people's rent. Still, Elena's excitement drowned out her nerves. She imagined herself walking across the stage, hearing her name called, seeing her grandmother's proud smile in the crowd. But as they stepped inside, the illusion cracked. A sales associate at the counter, a young woman with a perfect bob and a colder smile, looked up and hesitated, just for a second. Her eyes traveled from Martha's well-worn shoes to Elena's faded jeans, and something in her expression changed. It wasn't a surprise. It was judgment. Martha noticed, but she stayed calm. She had seen this look before, the quiet dismissal that followed her through life. Yet she smiled gently, hoping to soften the edges of their reception. "Good morning," she said warmly. "We're looking for a dress for my granddaughter's graduation." The associate's reply was polite on the surface, but laced with something sharp beneath. Her gaze flicked toward the racks of gowns and then back to them. It was the unspoken suggestion that perhaps they were in the wrong place. Elena didn't fully understand, but she felt it. The sudden chill in the room, the shift from invisible warmth to visible discomfort. Her fingers tightened around her grandmother's hand. Still, Martha led her deeper into the store. She believed that strength sometimes looked like walking forward even when every sign told you to turn away. As they browsed, Elena's joy began to fade. She saw the whispers between employees, the sideways glances. It wasn't her imagination. Every movement, every touch seemed to be watched. The girl who moments ago had felt like a princess now felt like an intruder. But Elena tried to stay hopeful. She picked up a soft blue dress, simple, elegant, and almost glowing under the store lights. For a moment, her smile returned. Then came the voice, casual but cutting, asking if she was sure she could afford it. The question sliced through the air like glass. Martha's heart sank, though her face didn't flinch. She placed a gentle hand on Elena's shoulder, reminding her to stand tall. But inside, a familiar pain stirred, the kind that never truly fades, only hides beneath years of endurance. Unaware of what was unfolding, miles away, Isabella Carter, Elena's mother, was in the middle of an investor meeting. At just 29, she was one of California's youngest self-made millionaires, the founder of a tech company that had grown from her dorm room idea into a near-billion-dollar enterprise. Her world was boardrooms, deadlines, and negotiations. But beneath all that, success was a promise. to give her daughter a life untouched by the prejudice she herself had faced. As Martha and Elena stood under the weight of judgment inside that boutique, Isabella's phone buzzed beside her laptop. A message from her mother. 3 simple words. Everything's about to change. Back at the store, Elena's excitement was gone. Her chest felt tight, her throat dry. The whispers had become clearer now. Pitying tones, half-hidden laughs. She wasn't sure what hurt more, their words or the way they made her feel small. Martha took her hand again, her eyes steady and kind. "Hold your head high, baby," she whispered under her breath. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." Outside, the afternoon light glinted off the boutique's glass facade. Beautiful, cold, and unwelcoming. Inside, a storm was quietly gathering. None of them, not the shoppers, not the staff, had any idea who this child truly was, or the power that was about to walk through their doors. Because behind every insult, every dismissive glance, and every whispered judgment, was a truth waiting to be revealed. And when it finally arrived, the walls of that boutique would never feel quite so safe again. The longer they stood inside the boutique, the heavier the silence grew. What had begun as quiet discomfort slowly turned into open humiliation. At first, it was the stares, the kind that pretended not to exist. Then came the whispers, the soft laughter, the pointed looks that made Elena's heart shrink inside her chest. The 2 women behind the counter exchanged smirks, their voices low but sharp enough to cut through the air. One of them, Chloe, leaned on the counter, arms crossed. The other, Amber, wore the tight smile of someone who enjoyed having power over others. Together, they formed the perfect storm of quiet cruelty. Martha asked politely if her granddaughter could try on a dress. Amber didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the back of the store, not to the beautiful racks that shimmered beneath chandeliers, but to a clearance section half hidden from sight. Racks of outdated designs hung there, some still tagged from last season's sales. Her voice was smooth, but her eyes told another story. "Maybe you'll find something more affordable back there." The words landed like stones. Elena looked down at her shoes. The sparkle in her eyes dimmed. But Martha, always calm, always composed, simply nodded. She had lived through worse. "Thank you," she said softly, and she led Elena toward the back, though her steps were heavy. As they browsed through the wrinkled dresses, Chloe hovered nearby. Her gaze followed their every move, like she was waiting for them to make a mistake. When Elena reached for a pastel gown, Chloe's voice snapped through the air. "Be careful. Those are imported fabrics." The implication was clear. Don't touch what you can't afford. Elena froze mid-motion, her small hand trembling slightly. She set the dress back down as if it might break. The embarrassment flushed through her like fire. Nearby, a pair of wealthy shoppers giggled quietly. One whispered to the other, "What are they even doing here?" The other shrugged, her tone dripping with condescension. "Maybe they're lost." Martha heard every word. But instead of anger, her face softened into something else, sadness. She looked at Elena and saw the tears building behind her granddaughter's brave silence. The same kind of silence she herself had once used to survive rooms like this. Her phone buzzed softly. A message. "Isabella, how's my girl doing?" Martha looked at Elena, standing small among racks that were never meant for her, and replied with quiet determination, "Everything's about to change." Moments later, Amber approached again. "Before she tries anything on," she said with a falsely sweet tone, "I'll need a credit card on file. Store policy." Martha blinked. "For a child trying on a dress?" Amber smiled tightly. "It's just a precaution. We've had incidents before." It wasn't precaution. It was prejudice. The kind that hides behind policies, pretending to be procedure. Martha knew it. Chloe knew it. Everyone watching knew it. Elena felt the sting before she understood it fully. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Grandma, Maybe we should just go. But Martha gently shook her head. No, sweetheart. You deserve to be here just like anyone else. For a long moment, no one moved. The air was tense, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then the store phone rang. Chloe grabbed it lazily. "Rodeo Luxe Boutique," she said, her tone bored. The voice on the other end was calm, but carried an authority that silenced the room. "This is Isabella Carter. My mother and daughter are in your store, and I hear they're being disrespected. I suggest you fix that before my legal team does." Chloe froze. Her posture straightened instantly. The name echoed in her head. Isabella Carter, the billionaire tech founder, the woman whose company was all over Forbes, the one who had once spoken at the Women in Power Summit, the one luxury brands courted. Her voice faltered. "Why, yes, ma'am. Of course." But it was too late. Martha's quiet smile said everything. The balance of power had just shifted. Minutes later, the glass doors opened again, and every head in the store turned. Isabella stepped inside, composed, elegant, and radiating calm authority. No flashy jewelry, no entourage, just a woman who owned her space in every sense of the word. Elena ran into her mother's arms, the tension finally breaking. Isabella knelt, brushing her daughter's hair back gently. Her eyes scanned the room, not angry, but assessing. The silence that followed was deafening. The same women who had sneered now stood frozen, unsure whether to speak or hide. Their smiles faltered under the weight of realization. And yet, Isabella said nothing at first. She didn't need to. The power in her quiet gaze spoke louder than any outburst ever could. Somewhere in the back, a manager whispered to another employee, "Is that Isabella Carter?" It was. Within minutes, her general counsel, Daniel Hayes, one of the most respected attorneys in Los Angeles, was on his way. So were two journalists, one from the Los Angeles Times, another from CNN. As the tension climbed, the staff scrambled to recover, pretending nothing had happened. But their panic was visible. In every stiff smile, every forced gesture of courtesy. When Isabella's team arrived, papers were placed on the counter. Lease documents, ownership records. Every single line shows one irrefutable truth. The boutique's building was owned by Isabella's real estate firm. Amber's breath caught. Chloe's hands began to shake. In an instant, everything flipped. The woman who had treated a child like she was invisible now stood under the harsh spotlight of their own actions. Cameras began to roll. Reporters started recording. But Isabella remained composed, calm as a storm before it breaks. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was steady. "This isn't just about my daughter," she said softly. "It's about every child who's ever been told they don't belong." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. For the first time, the boutique silence wasn't dismissive. It was terrified, because the people who once judged Elena by her appearance had just discovered that the very ground beneath their feet, the marble floors they stood on, belonged to the family they had tried to humiliate. And as the tension deepened, one question filled the air, unspoken yet unmistakable. What happens when power meets prejudice face to face? The tension inside the boutique was thick enough to choke on. What had begun as quiet mockery had spiraled into a moment none of them would forget. Cameras stood ready, journalists whispered to their teams, and the staff, once smug and dismissive, now looked pale beneath the soft glow of the chandeliers. The room that had once radiated luxury now pulsed with fear. Isabella stood at the center of it all, calm yet commanding. Her composure wasn't arrogance. It was power refined by years of struggle. Behind her quiet eyes lived every sleepless night, every rejection. Every door slammed in her face when she was a young black mother trying to build a life from nothing. She had been underestimated before, but never forgotten. Chloe tried to salvage control, her words trembling. "This was a misunderstanding, Miss Carter. We didn't mean." But Isabella raised a hand, silencing her. It wasn't anger that stopped Chloe mid-sentence. It was the sharp, unspoken reminder that her excuses meant nothing. Because for Isabella, this wasn't about words, it was about truth. Across the boutique, Martha stood tall beside Elena. Her granddaughter's small hand was wrapped tightly around hers, trembling but unbroken. She had taught her to walk through the world with dignity, even when others tried to strip it away. But at that moment, for the first time in years, tears welled in Martha's eyes. Not from sadness, but from pride. Daniel Hayes stepped forward, the echo of his polished shoes filling the silence. "Ms. Carter," he said softly, "I have the documents." The camera lenses zoomed in as he placed a folder on the counter. Inside were ownership records, property deeds, and legal rights. The very building they stood in, every inch of it, belonged to Isabella Carter's real estate firm. Amber's voice broke through the silence, a whisper barely audible. You own this place?" Isabella turned to face her, her tone steady. "I do." The weight of those words shattered the fragile illusion of superiority that had filled the room moments earlier. The power dynamic flipped in an instant, from humiliation to revelation. Amber's knees seemed to weaken. Chloe's face turned pale. The very people who had mocked a child now stood under the crushing weight of accountability. But Isabella didn't lash out. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she began asking questions, calm, surgical, cutting deeper with everyone. "How many diversity trainings have your employees completed?" she asked the store manager, who had just rushed in, breathless and panicked. "How many policies do you have protecting customers from racial bias? How many times have you judged someone before even asking their name?" No one answered. Their silence was an admission more powerful than any confession. Then came the final blow. Daniel's voice echoed through the boutique. "You have 1 minute to decide whether this will be handled privately or publicly. The media is already here." Amber burst into tears. She pleaded for forgiveness, for a chance to explain, to take it all back. "Please," she sobbed. "I didn't mean to." But Isabella's gaze didn't soften. "My daughter was humiliated because of her skin color," she said quietly. "That's not a mistake. That's a choice." Her words sliced through the air like thunder. The crowd of onlookers, shoppers, reporters, employees, watched in stunned silence. There was no turning back now. The manager, Veronica Steele, stepped forward, trying to intervene. "Ms. Carter, we can resolve this without." But Isabella cut her off with a single line that silenced the room. "Resolve it? The moment my child was told she didn't belong, this stopped being a misunderstanding. It became a mirror of everything still wrong with this world." Elena looked up at her mother, her small eyes glistening. For the first time, she understood what real strength looked like. It wasn't shouting or revenge. It was calm, deliberate power. Outside the glass doors, passers-by had gathered, watching the unfolding scene. The sunlight pouring in seemed to cast a spotlight on Isabella, a woman who had once walked these streets as a struggling single mother, now standing as the owner of the very empire that had tried to humiliate her family. Veronica's voice wavered. "Please, we'll do whatever you ask." Isabella nodded once, slowly. "Then start by admitting what you did." Amber's tears fell harder. Chloe's lips trembled as she tried to deny, to twist, to hide behind her uniform. But Daniel's countdown resumed, steady, relentless. 15 seconds. The cameras zoomed closer. The journalists began recording again. 10 seconds. The store's perfect silence cracked beneath the sound of quiet panic. 5. Amber broke. "Fine," she cried. "We discriminated. We judged them. We were wrong." Her voice echoed, fragile and desperate. The moment stretched on endlessly, the confession hanging in the air like a storm finally breaking. Isabella didn't move. She simply stared at the two women, then at the journalists who had captured it all. Slowly, she reached down and took Elena's hand. "You see, sweetheart? she said softly. The truth doesn't hide forever. The reporters rushed forward, flashes illuminating the room as questions flew through the air. But Isabella turned to them, her tone poised. Respect, she said clearly, should never be optional. The cameras caught her every word. The power, the composure, the unshakable grace. Behind her, Martha stood tall, her heart full. She had spent her life teaching her daughter resilience, and now she was witnessing that legacy rise higher than she ever imagined. As the crowd began to disperse, the once pristine boutique now felt smaller, quieter, stripped of its illusion of superiority. Amber collapsed into a chair, trembling. Chloe stared blankly at the floor, realizing too late that the hierarchy she believed in had just crumbled beneath her feet. And as Isabella guided Elena toward the door, a hush followed them. Not from fear, but from awe, because in that single moment, a mother had not just defended her child. She had rewritten the meaning of power. But outside, as the cameras continued flashing, one question lingered in the air like smoke after a storm. Would this moment truly change them, or would the world need to learn this lesson again? The story didn't end inside that boutique. The confrontation was only the beginning, the spark that lit something far greater than anyone inside those glass walls could have imagined. In the days that followed, the incident spread like wildfire. Videos of Isabella standing calmly, holding her daughter's hand while demanding accountability, flooded social media. Her poise became a symbol of modern grace under pressure, strength without rage, justice without vengeance. The clip was shared millions of times across platforms. Hashtags began to rise. Hashtag dress for respect, hashtag worth is not negotiable, and hashtag justice on rodeo. But for Isabella, it was never about fame or validation. It was about her daughter, and the countless other children who would one day walk into a room and be judged before they even spoke. Elena returned to school a week later, quiet but different. She carried herself with a calm dignity beyond her years. Her classmates whispered her name in admiration. Teachers smiled at her in the halls, though they didn't know what to say. But Elena didn't need words. She had learned something powerful that day, that self-worth is not given by others. It's carried within. Martha, too, found herself changed. For decades, she had taught her family to endure, to rise above. But this time, she realized something deeper. It was no longer enough to simply survive prejudice. They had to confront it. So when Isabella offered her a new role, as the public spokesperson for a foundation they would soon build together, she accepted without hesitation. That foundation, named the Elena Initiative, became a nationwide movement. Its mission was simple but profound: to protect children from racial and social discrimination, to educate institutions about dignity and equality, and to remind the world that every child deserves to be seen for who they are, not where they come from. Within 6 months, the Elena Initiative had supported over 180 families, from private schools to public housing communities. Scholarships were created, anti-bias programs were implemented, and conversations about equity began to take root in places that had long been silent. Meanwhile, the boutique's glamorous reputation began to crumble. Amber and Chloe, the two women whose cruelty had sparked the storm, were quietly dismissed. They tried to find new jobs in the luxury industry, but word had spread too far. Their names had become synonymous with the price of prejudice. For the first time, they faced the very judgment they had once so freely given. The store itself underwent a full audit. New management was brought in, and mandatory diversity training became a permanent policy. Yet, for all the structural change, the deeper message remained: no policy can replace humanity. Weeks later, Isabella sat in the front row at Elena's graduation ceremony. The stage lights shimmered as Elena walked forward in a soft blue dress, not from a luxury boutique, but from a small, family-owned shop in Pasadena. The owner had treated her like a princess, not because of who her mother was, but because of who she was becoming. As Elena accepted her diploma, She looked out at the crowd and found her mother's eyes. The world had tried to humiliate her once, but now she stood taller than she ever had. Not because she had been defended, but because she had seen what real power looked like. Calm, intelligent, and unapologetically proud. Later that evening, as they sat together on their porch, Elena asked the question that had been sitting in her heart for weeks. "Mom," she said softly, "why didn't you shout that day? Why didn't you get angry?" Isabella smiled, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "Because real strength doesn't scream," she said. "It speaks with purpose." Those words would stay with Elena for the rest of her life. Years later, when journalists asked Isabella about that day on Rodeo Drive, she never spoke of revenge or satisfaction. Instead, she said one line that became a cornerstone of her foundation's message. "The greatest revenge is rising so high that their prejudice can no longer reach you." The boutique on Rodeo Drive still stands today, gleaming beneath the California sun. But somewhere in the reflection of its glass, you can still see the shadow of that moment. A mother, a daughter, and a grandmother standing together, refusing to bow to ignorance. Because that day was never just about a dress. It was about visibility, dignity, change. And every time another young girl walks through a door she was once told wasn't hers to open, she carries a piece of Elena's story, a silent reminder that she belongs everywhere her dreams can take her. So as you watch this now, ask yourself, how many times have we stayed silent while someone was judged for their skin, their accent, their name? How many more Elenas are still waiting for someone to speak up for them? Because injustice doesn't end when a headline fades. It ends when enough people decide that silence is no longer acceptable. And if there's one thing Isabella Carter's story proves, it's this. You don't have to shout to change the world. You just have to stand tall enough that no one can ever look down on you again. Because worth, respect, and dignity are not luxuries. They are human rights. What did you think of Isabella and Elena's story? Did it move you the way it moved millions of others? Would you have stayed calm like Isabella? Or spoken out in anger? Tell us in the comments below. Your voice matters. If this story touched your heart or made you think differently about how people are treated, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss more powerful stories like this one. Together, we can make every voice heard.